Hello, welcome back to another episode of Math with Haas. You're watching Precalculus Season 2, Episode 32, or 39, Part 2. We're continuing our investigation in trigonometry, and now we're going to start diving into proving trig identities. And so what we are going to do in this video is presuppose a knowledge of the Pythagorean identities. Okay. So we're presupposing the reciprocal identities, the Pythagorean identities. So just to recall, reciprocal identities is fun facts such as secant x is equaling 1 over cosine x, cosecant x equaling 1 over sine x, and of course we got the relevant tangent, cotangent. We have facts such as sine squared x plus cosine squared x is equaling 1, and also the similar statements that can be made concerning tangents, cotangents, and so on and so forth. So that is just kind of what we're presupposing is all those identities for these. And now we're going to dive in and have lots of fun. So cosine x secant x over tangent x equaling cotangent x. So the method here is you want to start with one side. It doesn't matter which side, either the left side or the right side. And what you want to do is work your way through algebraically and arrive at the other side. So if I was to start on the right side here, I would start with a cotangent, and I'll have to work my way to get a cosine times secant divided by tangent. Usually, when we prove identities, it's usually better to start with what looks more complicated and simplify it to what's more simple. So in this case, we're going to start on the left side because it has a cosine, a secant, and a tangent. There's a lot more things going on, which means there's a lot more things we can play around with, and we want to reduce it to a cotangent. So we're going to work it out from the left side. Now once we commit to working out one side, you just stick to it and you work it out to the end. In theory, it doesn't matter which side you pick. You should be able to work it out one way and get to it the other way. In fact, if you really wanted to have fun, you can work out each of these problems both ways. Alright, so let's see here. We are presupposing we have cosine x secant x over tangent x. Okay. Now, the first thing we're going to note is I see a cosine times secant here. What? Now, to me, that asks the question, well, what's going on with that secant? Well, if we recall, secant x is equal to 1 over cosine x. Well, that means then when you have cosine x times secant x, that this is the same thing as cosine x times 1 over cosine x, which is just 1. So this is equal to 1 over tangent x. And 1 over tangent x is just cotangent x. And therefore we have proved our identity. So notice we had to make use of two trig identities, namely what secant x equaled, and namely what cotangent x equaled. Alright, another example. Tangent x over cosecant x is equal to 1 over cosine x minus 1 over secant x. Intriguing. So, as I said, it doesn't really matter which side you pick. You can work it out and work your way to the other. So, they both, in this case here, it's kind of hard to tell which one's more complicated. So, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I guess. So, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Which one do we want to pick? It doesn't really matter, so we'll pick the left. So, let's see here. tangent x over cosecant x. Maybe we picked a harder one to start with. Alright, so if we start here, what do we want to do? Well, we can note that we're going to want to get this in terms of sines and cosines, right? So, this means we have a sine over cosine x. And if we think about cosecant, that's a 1 over sine x. Okay. So if we start with this, we can see then, so we're just going to make a note here, cosecant x is 1 over sine x, tangent x is equal to sine x over cosine x. So starting with this, then we can note that this is equal to sine squared x over cosine x, because what we have here is a fraction divided by a fraction. So we can invert and multiply our fractions. We'll do that work over here in green for a moment. So sine x over cosine x times sine x over 1. So I have to work in green to verify this equals sign. So if we think about this cosine square, or the sine squared, we can keep in mind the fact that if sine squared x plus cosine squared x is equal to 1, then this means that sine squared x is equal to 1 minus cosine squared x. So the reason why I want to think about this fact is when I look at the right side here, I have to have a minus. So in order to introduce some sort of fraction divided by a fraction, I need to think about rewriting this numerator here in a way where I have a quantity subtracted by quantity. And since I have this sine squared, I immediately thought of my nice Pythagorean identity, which I knew I could rewrite in this manner here. So doing all that work, we get a 1 minus cosine squared x over cosine x, which we can now break up into two fractions, namely a 1 over cosine x minus a cosine squared x over cosine x. So we can be happy right now. We have our 1 over cosine, so we're halfway there. So we get 1 over cosine x minus cosine x. Now the problem is, how do we handle this cosine? Well, we can keep in mind that if secant x is equal to 1 over cosine x, then if we take the reciprocal of both sides, then 1 over secant x is equal to cosine x. So we can replace that cosine with a 1 over secant, so we get 1 over cosine x minus 1 over secant x, and that proves our identity. Alright, so there we are, we did it. If you've enjoyed our videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Consider supporting us financially on Patreon. And stick around for our next video because we're going to do some more examples. So, thank you for watching this video. Thank you for joining our math party, and I will see you next time.